He was the leader of the progressive rock pioneers Gentle Giant, went on to a record label career where he discovered Bon Jovi, Dream Theater, Pantera, and orchestrated the comebacks by the bands AC/DC and Bad Company in the 90s. It's Derek Shulman. He's got some stories to tell coming up next here on Booked on Rock. Welcome back to Booked on Rock, the podcast for those about to read and rock. I'm Eric Senich. Our guest is Derek Shulman, author of the book Giant Steps, My Improbable Journey from Stage Lights to Executive Heights. Welcome to the podcast, Derek.
My pleasure to see you, Eric.
Great book. Congratulations. We were just chatting a little bit about how the book's been doing, and the responses have been great. I'm not surprised. There are so many stories. You've had quite a career.
So I've been told.
Let's start with the beginning, your childhood, where you grew up, because your father had such an impact on you, both while he was around and after he passed away. And that really hit me because I was very close to my dad and he meant so much to me. I lost him about 3 years ago. You talk about his death at such a young age, had a profound effect on you.
Yes, it did. I mean, he was a professional musician. He was a jazz trumpeter, and he had a band, and he was full of life. I mean, effectively, I'll tell you that quick story. One morning he would get up early, and he was a heavy smoker, and like a jazz musician, a bit of a drinker, not an alcoholic, but certainly drinking, he was woke up one morning, I think in May, and 65, and my mother said he's not feeling well, and I was the man of the house per se then, and I went to see what was wrong, and my mother said he went back to bed, and that's someone like my father. And when I went upstairs, I could see that he was very, very ill. So I basically ran down from the stairs, jumped over the wall, the garden wall, where my brother Phil was living, believe it or not, next door. And I said, "Can you come over quick? My dad is he looks really sick." We both jumped over, and he was he was gasping for air, and basically he was, well, I know now, as I explained in the book, that he was having a massive heart attack. So I didn't know that then. We just thought, what the hell's going on? Phil said, "Go get a doctor." So I literally ran about 200 yards where I knew the doctor lived. And we did have a phone, and we had nothing going on. And I knocked at the door and said, "My dad is real. Please, can you come?" It was about 6:30 or 6:45 in the morning. And I ran back. And when I arrived back, I ran upstairs, and my brother Phil and myself literally saw him take his last breath. And it was, the doctor ultimately arrived, and we said, "Is there anything you could do?" We didn't have a telephone in those days. We're talking about, days of not very wealthy, let's put it that way.
Right.
Poverty, in fact. And
Glasgow, Scotland.
no, that was Portsmouth, in the south coast of England.
Okay.
Um, Basically, we saw him take his last breath, and the doctor said, "There's no point in calling an ambulance or anything. He's gone." And I just remember that shaped my life in so many ways. Number one, that you lose a father at a young, I was 14 or 15, and very sort of, in a bad time to lose any parent. But but at the same time, it affected me personally because I saw what, uh, how can I put this? He was a drinker, and he smoked way too much, 50 cigarettes, 60 cigarettes a day. And the fact that he died at 50 years old in the prime of his life and the prime of his creative life uh, made me, number one, traumatized me because I have a health anxiety for all of my life, which I explain in the book. And number two, that I um, not made a decision. The decision was made that I would never allow myself to be in a position where I would, let any kind of substance abuse, if you like, and not that drinking or smoking, well, are is considered substance abuse, but certainly that was a big factor in my life, and I have never smoked in my life, and neither have my siblings, by the way, after that day. And rarely I'll have a glass of wine. I've never done any drug in my life, seriously, except way back. I tried marijuana. I didn't like it, so I've never touched anything which affects my health, number one, and my mind altering situation as well.
That says a lot because you were in a business where the temptations were there. I'm sure a lot.
Oh, absolutely. They were always around, and whether it was a band or an executive. I mean, that was one of the perks of being in that side of the fence of, getting getting high or whatever it is to do that. I had never felt any peer pressure at all yeah, come on, I'm not, I wasn't interested in again, in having anything that would alter my judgment and my mind perception.
When did you decide you wanted to get into music?
Well, music was always around. That's something which there was music and musicians were always around our house. So, it was something which I thought everyone had. But of course, I was in an unusual environment. It was a very sort of, kind of almost I can't explain it, but it was a very free kind of environment. My mother loved music as well. She was a dancer, and so music and musical instruments were always around. But I do remember that, and we also played instruments. My brother Ray was played the violin and classically, and my father and my mother encouraged him to when he was not having lessons to practice. I had played the saxophone. We all read music, but I do remember that when I heard "Love Me Do" on the radio by the Beatles, that was a time when I said, okay, we're having fun, playing. I had Spanish guitar, but I'm going to be, this is going to be my life. I'm going to be a musician, and I want to make myself. I want to be a rock star. I mean, I said that. I actually said that in school. But yeah, it was that period of time when I heard the Beatles. It changed everything for me, but also for everything in England because the culture changed, the music changed, everything changed in England that period, 64, 65, for until the early 70s. Young people were basically encouraging the environment and being the sort of leaders in the whole the world. I mean, in what they were doing, what we were wearing, what music was being heard, and it was an incredible time to be in England and and think about being a musician, and that's what I did.
I can only imagine because I'm old enough to remember what it was like when the grunge rock period took over and the cultural shift, but that is not even close to I think what you experienced there. Being in you lived in England most of your life, but you were born in Glasgow.
That's correct. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was
When did you move to England?
19. Well, I was 2 years old, so it would have been 46
Okay.
and I was born in no, sorry, 49. I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind. I was born in the tenements of Glasgow, and if you read anything or know about that lifestyle, it's a pretty horrific situation to be in because it was in an immigrant situation, and my grandparents came over from Poland and Lithuania, and there was 8 families living in this conditions of poverty. We had one outdoor toilet for 8 families, no bathroom. But when we moved to Portsmouth, it wasn't like a paradise per se. We lived in a house where we had 2 bedrooms for a family of 5 kids. But again, we didn't have a bathroom. There was an outhouse, and the our bath nights were Friday nights with a tin bath outside the house, and we that's what how I grew up.
Now, speaking of the Beatles, great story in the book. At the age of 19, just 2 years after your schoolmaster told you you'll never become a pop star, you were in a band signed to the same label as the Beatles, Parlophone Records.
Yeah.
Simon Dupree and the Big Sound. How do they form?
I formed the band with school friends. I said, after the Beatles happened, and my sister gave me my first Spanish guitar. I learned three or four chords. Yeah, I thought I was a guitarist. So, and I knew a couple of friends who had a guitar, and we all kind of put it together. And I asked my brother Ray, who was, a violinist and actually being groomed for the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain to be in the band, to play rhythm violin, actually. It was a crazy thing. But, so it was the school, school friends. And ultimately we started playing, and we realized, myself and my brother Ray, that my school friends weren't very good. And we had music in our DNA. So we picked up our instruments, and thanks to my again, thanks to the DNA of both of my parents, it came naturally being a musician. So the kids, our school friends, dropped out, and we eventually got other players from different bands to join the band. We started playing around the area. We started playing in the south coast of England, and then other places, and we got a really good fan base. And I asked my elder brother then to join the band because he was a teacher, and he didn't like it. And he joined the band as a saxophonist and trumpet player, and he bought the van.
Wow.
He had the money.
So
So
three brothers in the band.
three brothers in the band and three other musicians, and my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, worked for the BBC. And she said, my brothers are doing really well. They're playing all around. They're getting a ton of fans, which we were. Why don't you just, go see them? He did. And he became our manager. And he got us an audition at Abbey Road to get a record deal. And we went up to London. Portsmouth to London's about 60 miles. And we played in front of George Martin and all the other, Jeff Emerick and Norrie Parham, all the staff there. And we thought we were going to basically, play a couple of songs. And they said it was about 20, 25, about 25 staffers there. And they said, okay, play your set. I mean, we literally had to play our set in front of like a 25, people sitting like this.
Yeah.
But we pulled it off. We played our asses off. We didn't know whether we had a record deal or not. And a couple of days later, John King, our brother-in-law, called and said, "You're on Parlophone Records. Congratulations." And we had a record deal.
Now you were called the Roadrunners, but then changed it to Simon Dupree and the Big Sound. Simon Dupree, the first Lord Mayor of Portsmouth,
Yep.
and also you're named after a journalist writing that you had a very big sound. So if people are curious,
That's exactly what happened. I mean, we were given these names,
I love those
uh,
stories.
and we said, "Okay, it sounds good to us."
Yeah, and you had early success with the singles "I See the Light," "Reservations," along with "Daytime, Nighttime." But it's with the song "Kites" that you have a big hit. It's the first top 10 UK single. It
Right.
was written by outside songwriters, though. Your first words after hearing it was, "You've got to be kidding me." In your defense, it was different from what you previously recorded. Why did the label feel it was a good idea to record it?
Well, actually, it was the label and our manager, and they thought, the first couple of singles they kind of nudged the top 40, but they thought it was the song could be something that uh, could get on radio, of course, and that was very important. And so we heard it and we thought, this is not our style, but you know what, we'll make the best of it. And we recorded it, and every session in at Abbey Road is 3 hours. I mean, literally, that's all you had. Every band, not just us, had 3 hours to write and record a beat, or not write, but record an A side and a B side. So we went in and recorded the that song Kites and the B side, and we went actually right after that was recorded. We were on a tour of Scandinavia, and and I remember, we didn't. The record came out about 2 weeks later. In those days, it was literally a week or 2 weeks later. And I got a call. Is Derek Shulman on board on on the ferry coming back from Malmo to Hull in England. And, just as a sidebar, the North Sea during that period of time is not a nice place to have a 36-hour um, ferry ride because it was
Really?
well, we were throwing up nonstop. I mean, seasickness. It wasn't even close. However, I got this call, a satellite call on a satellite phone. Is there a Derek Shulman on board? And my first thought was, oh shit, what's happened? Um, and I went to the captain, and they said, there's a call for you from London. It's London, why not Portsmouth? Something's up. And it was our publicist. And she said, Derek, are you sitting up? I said, no, I'm standing up. And she said, your record just hit the top 20. Congratulations. You're on Top of the Pops next week. And being on Top of the Pops, that's a TV show.
Yeah,
And that basically said, uh, if you're on that show, you're going to be that record is going to be a hit record.
that's
And
a
that's
big deal.
all like it was yesterday.
There's a story about Sid Barrett in the book that I thought was really interesting. That there was music you recorded under the name The Moles, and it was starting to take off until Sid Barrett burst the bubble. Tell us about this. This was a side project. You wanted. It's kind of ties in with the fact that that song was maybe a little too mainstream or poppy for you, maybe, and you were looking to do something more experimental.
Yeah, well, in fact, again, our manager, John, they said that they've had a 3 hour window in Abbey Road to record another song. Why don't you guys meeting me and my brothers? No, not the band. It was just me, Ray, and Phil went up, and we wrote this song. We Are the Moles, uh, basically making a sound which is kind of psychedelic, and and his idea was to put it out under with the moles, and it started taking off. People thought it was the Beatles because it sounded like the Beatles. It was very Sergeant Pepperish, and it started climbing the charts, and it went to number 80 and then number 50, and then there was an article in Melody Maker, which is a British music magazine, with an interview with Sid Barrett, and Floyd were recording at the same time or after we recorded that track. And he was asked about what do you think of the Moles because they were psychedelic, and this song was getting a whole lot of airplay, and people thought it was like we were competing with Pink Floyd with our psychedelic sound. And he said that's not some new psychedelic band, that's that shitty group Simon Dupree. And the
Wow.
record went from like 50 to 5,000 the next week.
Kite's success was a great accomplishment after the hard work you guys put in, and you refused to give up, and you finally get the hit single. But you say it was the end of the beginning of the beginning of the end for Simon Dupree. Talk about what led to the end of that band and the start of Gentle Giant. And Elton John plays a part in this story.
Correct, yes. Well, Elton, during that, yeah, just after we had, this very big hit, and it was being played on the radio nonstop. Our keyboard player got what was it? I can't remember what it was, but something which made him very ill, and he was not able to play for several months. And we had to get a dep to play, and we heard from our management there's a keyboard player called Reg Dwight who's really good. So me and my brother Ray went up to Watford and met Reg and said, look, we've got this big tour of England and Scotland. How would you like to come and join us? And he said, how much am I going to be paid? And I said, well, about 35 to 40 pounds a week. And he said, that much? He was earning at that time 10 pounds a week. So he came down to Portsmouth to rehearse, and he was fantastic. He was just a superb, he learned the music within a day. And we went on that tour with him. And he saw, we saw in him someone who was number one, a great guy and someone who's very special, but also someone who was a friend, who could be a friend. And ultimately remain friends until this day. And he would also someone who was incredibly musical and new music that we weren't really aware of. And he said, "You guys are so good. Have you heard of other bands like Spirit in California and Zappa, of course, Miles Davis?" And he said, "Yeah, we're familiar with them, but not as much as you are. Tell us more about it." And so he basically kind of introduced us to a sound that we weren't really as familiar with. And when he finished, we basically started listening to things outside of our own cocoon. And when we decided to finish Simon Dupree, we remember that Reg, um, basically turned us on to music that we thought was quite really interesting. And I called him and said, "We're doing what you kind of like intimated when you were with us last year. We're going to break up this band and we're going to put a new band together. Are you interested?" He said, "Absolutely." So we went up to, me and Ray went up to Watford. He was living with his mom and he just met Bernie at that time. And Bernie was there and
They were writing songs together at that house.
yeah, at the house, yep. And so he said, "I've written several things, which, I've got to record somehow." Um, and played us, Skyline Pigeon and a couple of other songs. And to be honest, we didn't say anything to him, but, we didn't think it was for us. And then at the same time, he said, "I'm changing my name from Reg Dwight to Elton John." And we thought, "Oh, that won't work." So, of course, on both, so we decided that it wasn't going to work for us, and we said, "That's okay, Reg. Look, we'll be back in touch." Thank God for him that we turned him down, and the next year he was Elton John, and the next year we were Gentle Giant and trying to scramble around for gigs. So, you know, it was a good situation that we said no thanks to Skyline Pigeon.
What a great story. And you went through the name change too, Gentle Giant. So that comes thanks to somebody named Colin Richardson. Who is Colin and what's the story behind the band name?
Well, Colin worked for a new manager, Jerry Braun. And Jerry was a manager of the last stages of Simon Dupree. And we told Jerry that we don't want to do this anymore, even though we were still very popular, we were still making good money. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "We want to do something which is completely different, something which is 180 from going to these venues and people wanting to hear the hits, and us we were progressing as musicians anyway, and it was very stymieing, so that in certain respects having a couple of big hits were like millstones around our necks in certain respects. So we said we want to start something new, and he said, "You know what, if you want to start something new, I will fund that, and I will, for 6 to 9 months, you find the right musicians and you put this new band together." And I have to say that in itself is like no one would do that today. I mean, to me, patronage is like unbelievable. He had that much faith in the Shulman brothers, if you like. And we started writing new stuff, but then we started looking for musicians that could, put us together and do something completely new. We didn't know what it was going to be. We had no idea. But we did know that it wasn't going to be anything like we did before. And the first musician that joined us was Kerry Binier, our keyboard player, who had just graduated from the Royal Academy of Music with a degree in composition and percussion. And we invited him down to Portsmouth, and we thought, "Holy shit, this is someone who is not just amazing as a musician, but someone who is an incredible songwriter as well." So, we were trying to write songs and trying to put new things together, but he fitted in so well, both personally and musically, and also yeah, and also friend wise. So he moved down to Portsmouth, and then we advertised for a guitarist. Uh, and we went through, I don't know, 40 or 50 guitars until we found Gary Green. And Gary and he came. We were rehearsing in London, and we we invited guitarists to come in, and he was the first guitarist to basically say, "Can I just tune up first, please?" When he said that, he almost had a gig there and then.
Yeah, right.
So, but he was a great player. I mean, we knew that Gary would fit in perfectly.
I really admire though the integrity of what you did, and for financial reasons, we know Gentle Giant worked out, and you built up a great fan base, and you did just fine. But to pursue the art, in other words, you're not looking for hit singles. Hit singles can make you a lot of money,
Right.
but you're not even thinking about that. You're just thinking about the total vision is what we want to do from an artistic standpoint. Was there ever any concern about making sure that you're going to get by financially, or did you just say, we'll find a way to make it work?
I think the latter. I think that we will find a way to make it work. But listen, we didn't do it for fame and fortune, unlike today's generation. We did it for the music, and we all worked. We were workaholics. We worked really hard. Having been in Simon Dupree and the Big Sound, it was a fantastic apprenticeship. We at during that period of time, we could literally play 11 or 12 shows a week, seriously. And so you would learn how to entertain as well as play. I mean, play your instrument really well. Because if you didn't, you weren't going to be in a band. No one would come to see you. So that was a great apprenticeship to be in a different kind of band, but playing different kind of music. It was a good apprenticeship, and we had musicians around that could push us, and we pushed them. So that was something that we were able to do. And again, we were lucky in that we had a patron, if you like. But at the same time, we were pretty good from the get-go. I mean, we worked our asses off to make sure that we played live really well, and that was, in fact, in certain respects, we were much better as a live band. We did much better as a live band and than a recorded band. Again, that was something that we throughout the 10 years of Gentle Giant, that was something that we always had. I mean, we felt like the recordings were sketches for the oil painting we took on stage.
Well, I guess then that we should go right now to Tony Visconti, who was the ideal producer for the band, right? I mean, he was the guy that was going to help transfer that live energy and sound into the studio. And he was so important to the band. He worked with T-Rex, Badfinger, Straubs, David Bowie, of course.
Right.
Why was he the ideal producer for Gentle Giant?
We didn't know him, but he was suggested to be our producer, and we met him. And again, we've been very lucky in that we just hit it off, and it was like he was a member of the band, and he saw that we were pretty good musically, and so was he. He was classically trained, and he taught us how to record. We had never done an LP before. I mean, we had an LP with Simon Dupree, but that was a series of like singles put together. But doing an album was a whole different animal. But he was, I just saw him a couple of weeks ago. We did an in-store together and a radio show together, and we talked about what it was. He really admired our musicianship. He really did, and we admired his musicianship. He was really a superb musician, and we also it was like having an open book, and we filled it completely with all the ideas that were coming out, and he was able to whittle down those ideas into that first album called Gentle Giant. We were so lucky that we had Tony there at the first outset.
Hey guys, back to the show just a bit, but first I want to tell you about an exclusive deal for Booked on Rock viewers. Get 15% off any purchase at oldglory.com. Over 300,000 officially licensed items covering music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture. Merchandise featuring legendary music artists like Bob Marley, The Beatles, Grateful Dead, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, and many more. Go to oldglory.com and make sure to use the promo code BookedOnRock. Also find a link in this episode's description, or just go to bookedonrock.com and click on My Deals. And it was a 10-year run, 1970 to 1980. Gentle Giant was together, and there was a point halfway through 1974 when you write about everything clicked. you were the best band on the planet. There was a show at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles where you say it was like an out of body experience. I mean, the band was just so tight. But this is around the time when things start to come apart. What was happening at that period? People got older, priorities changed, band fatigue. What was going on?
No, I think the 70, but the Shrine, yeah, the Shrine was an incredible gig. I do remember that, where literally the fans, 8,000 people, uh, would not would not leave the auditorium. They refused after two or three encores, and we didn't have any more music to play them. And we played, was it in when you do when you do your sound check, you play different bits and pieces, and we played In the Midnight Hour as one of our sound check songs, and we had nothing else. So we at the very last song we had no music. And then we went out there and said, look, we don't have any more material, so we're going to just play In the Midnight Hour. And they actually started leaving the auditorium like after that. But that was an incredible thing that for 10 or 15 minutes a crowd stays and just cheers. It's such an amazing moment that what you can't. But it was a highlight. Um, and but that period of time we were on fire. We really were. We produced at that point, I think, The Power and the Glory and Freehand, probably our best, I guess, some of our best material. And we were clicking as a mature band that we're doing quite well. I mean, as far as a fan base, we weren't selling millions of records. We were on certainly the top 40 of top 50 with a couple of our albums.
At that point, when you reach that peak, is that where maybe things start to decline a bit? Like, hey, we've reached as far as we could go, or because it was still a ways that you were like 1978, the album Giant for a Day, you changed the sound a little bit, more pop rock sensibility to it. Wasn't received well by fans, but you came back with Civilian in 1980, and a lot of critics theorized that if the band continued with that sound, it would have been the springboard for Gentle Giant to evolve further, maybe break through to a bigger or massive audience. But you felt that it was time to pull the plug. Why was that?
Well, the bottom line. Well, yes, you're right, exactly. We followed up with Interview, which was received pretty well. I mean, not as good as Power and Glory, and then I guess it was, and then we saw and heard that realized that radio had changed in America. America was the big marketplace. I mean, obviously we still did very, very well in Europe and Canada, of all places, but the US was a big marketplace, and radio had changed, and they used to play, a side of the record of any band, or it was a free form radio, and then AOR hit radio, and they play one track of an album, and that one track had to be, had to sort of kind of cross over, and we heard artists who were basically the same, um, in the same sort of same kind of place that we were in, like a Genesis and Yes.
Right, genre. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That were able to get a track that was able to be on FM radio, which was a kind of a single. And we never thought ourselves as a singles band. We did that before. That's something we just what we weren't really what one we weren't really interested in doing. However, I guess peer pressure and knowing that would certainly springboard us to that level of wherever they were going, to try and do something which is a little more commercial. And that was, that's something we should and didn't want to do, but we shouldn't have tried, because we were never a band that intended to be commercial. We were a band that, dude, we were probably selfish in the fact that we did it for ourselves first, and pushed ourselves at number one. Then we pushed it, took it on stage, and hoped that what we did would make an audience enjoy what we did and also have fun as well. And then we realized that if we didn't do that, then our audiences might dwindle a little, which they started to dwindle. And we realized, okay, then we have to try something. And then we did Giant for a Day, which is our attempt, if you like, to make a poppier commercial record. And some of it, I think some of it's pretty good. However, it wasn't what Gentle Giant was originally made for, and the fans did not like that album. And ultimately, it was not really an album that uh, we should have made. Um,
How do you
but
feel about Civilian?
I think Civilian is a really good album.
Yeah.
And I think that, the band feels they're mixed about that, but I think it's a really good album. However, Columbia, and I thought, okay, if we do this and kind of take out some of the uh, experimental stuff, but keep in the musicality, uh, this gives us a shot to break into the 80s and what other bands did. And Columbia, who we signed to after Capitol, um, basically let the ball drop, and effectively it didn't happen. I mean, it didn't get any radio play. We toured on it, but really, it was, and that was the sort of signal to the band that, look, if you could continue, we could do another track, we could have another album. But then you start to become a tribute band. Then you become a parody of what you started out to become. So even though we toured with that album and we did quite well, we knew. In fact, we had a meeting before the tour, and I and Kerry, the keyboard player, decided we weren't going to continue with this because I saw the writing on the wall that, that if we continued and started doing stuff that we did 10, 12 years ago, it would it would destroy what we started out wanting to be. And I just saw that happening, and that vision of, of trying to be someone who you were 10, 15, 20 years ago, and a member leaves and then you get someone else. That's a horror show to me, and that's something I would never want, and we would want ever want. So we decided to stop the band, stop the music, and that chapter, that 10-year chapter for me and for all of us was closed. And it was a superb chapter for me.
Giant Steps, My Improbable Journey from Stage Lights to Executive Heights is the book. We're here with the author and the man who lived that journey, Derek Shulman. Third part of the book gets into your new path as a record executive. In 1982, you moved to New York to become director of rock radio promotions with Polygram. Bands you worked with early on, The Jam, Tears for Fears, Scorpions, Kiss. In 1983, you moved out of radio promo and into A&R. What's the main job of an A&R guy? For those who are not familiar with, you hear that term a lot.
Well,
A&R guy.
A&R doesn't mean anything to what it did when I was doing it. Uh, um, Artisan repertoire is what it actually means. And you are the person that decides or finds the artist that the record company will put their marketing resources, their promotional resources, their sales resources, etc., behind their recordings. And that's who you were. You were the guy that finds the talent for the record label. That's what it was back in the day, and that's what I became. And I realized that was something that I was pretty good at, and but good in the fact that I could bring a lot of my background, all of my background, to this new situation, which I had never in a million years thought I would be in, to be
Well,
honest.
yeah, and I don't think any of your peers expected it, right?
Absolutely not. I mean, it was almost like Luke Skywalker turning into Darth Vader.
Yes. Right. Because now you got to look for bands. You're looking for hit songs, hit
Yeah,
bands, the look, the sound. Yeah.
yeah, and you know, well, I did know about having hits because we had a couple of hits with my first band. But yes, I had to think about commercial success um, as well as I'll use this word, authenticity.
Right.
And every band that I signed and I was involved with, And I'll say this, I'll say it out loud because it's important that people think, oh, there he was in this great prog band and he sold out. No, no, I sold. I looked for anyone, no matter who it was, to be authentic and to do something that no one else is doing, whether it's pop or rock or 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 progressive music or country or hip hop or whatever. They were, authentic is the most important thing for me. And just about every band I worked with were authentic in their own way.
Yeah, one of the early bands, Bon Jovi. 2 weeks into your gig, you hear a song on a Long Island radio station that you couldn't get out of your head, and it was called Runaway by a kid from Saraville, New Jersey. It wasn't a band yet. It was just John Bon Jovi. Share with us some of the story of signing Bon Jovi.
Well, I heard this song "Runaway" on the radio, and I thought, "Damn, what a great song!" It was a song that John uh, was able to get on the sampler of music, local music in New York, um, and it was called Johnny Bon Jovi. But I kept hearing this on this radio station, WAPP, and I said, "Wow, what is this song?" And when it came on, I just some inquiries, and I heard from that he was represented by a lawyer in Philadelphia, like called Arthur Mann. I got in touch with him, and he said, "Yeah, this is this kid. He's working at the power station for his second cousin Tony Bon Jovi, and he recorded this song with some session guys. Do you want to hear more? I've got a demo of his stuff." And I said, "I'd love to hear it." And he brought the demo, and uh, they were really good songs. And I thought, "Who the hell is?" So I said, "I'd love to meet John." And he came over to my office, and literally when he came in, every girl's head turned
All
around.
right, I'm sure.
I mean, this is like this guy is like he was so good looking. His hair was like flowing, and boy, the girls were like wet. I'll just leave it to your imagination.
Yes. Now, what was on that demo, by the way? Were it songs from that first album like Roulette and
Um,
uh,
okay, but it was songs from that first album.
She Don't Know Me? I think is on that original too. Yeah.
Yep, yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Roulette. Yep. That
Okay.
And when I sat down with him, I said, "John, I saw this," and we got talking about what it was, who I was, and why I was doing. We were sitting together, and I said, "So what is it? Who is it you want to be?" Because John, it could be he's so good looking, and he could be a pop star or a rock star or something. I said, "What is it, and who is it you want to be?" And he looked me in the eye and said, "I want to be bigger than Elvis." And when he said that, you could take it two ways or three ways. I'm being punked, or he's just saying it because that's what he had to say because he's been sitting with this guy. But no, this came. I could tell that this was something in his head that no one was going to stop him if he was given a chance, and I believed him, and he was putting this band together, and I saw a couple of shows. Richie joined the band, and he had a couple of other guys from Jersey, and he did
Tico. Yeah. Tico.
Alec
Alec.
and
Okay.
Dave Bryan, Dave Rashbell at the time,
Okay.
and
Okay.
they did a couple of showcases, and I said to my boss, "I'm going to sign him," because I knew that the potential was there. They weren't amazing when they started, but and they had all the elements that I knew that it would take to make it work. I introduced them to Doc McGee, and we recorded the first album at the Power Station.
Did you see a chemistry between John and Richie?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that was it. That was when he got Richie. That was you in every band in the rock genre. There's always you have to have there's a Joe Perry and Steven Tyler. There's Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, John Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora. That was perfect. His choice of Richie being in the band and their choice was perfect, and it was so good together. Well, the whole band was so good.
I know everybody loves Slippery When Wet, which I do too, but I say it all the time. New Jersey is right at the top. my favorite Bon Jovi album. It's the songs that are not just the singles; it's the album tracks that are so good.
And that was well, so that was New Jersey was I mean that sort of Slippery was the third album, and we I introduced him to Desmond Child,
Okay,
and I said, John, how about writing with someone else? Had it been me saying that to me in another band, I would have said go to hell. But John was very pragmatic. He said, look, if it works, it works, and it obviously worked. And we went to Vancouver with to to do the album with Bruce Fairman, Bob Rock, and Mike Fraser. And Slippery When Wet was recorded. We put the record out, and it was gigantic.
Desmond wrote "You Give Love a Bad Name,"
Living on a Prayer.
"Living on a Prayer," which I remember John Bon Jovi saying "Living on a Prayer." I don't think that's going to be a hit.
Oh no, no, that's not true.
He didn't say that because I thought it was a quote that he said, and he's like, "Boy, was I wrong?"
No, no, what that's history being rewritten in a different fashion. However, he did tell me that when he wrote I was listening to the demos. He said this song I think will be a classic. Not a Living on a Prayer is one to Dead or Alive.
Yeah.
I've got this song and I'm sure it's going to be this will be our classic. And he's not wrong.
Oh no, that is a classic. Now you said John was never arrogant, but he knew how to play hardball. You found this out when he asked for a separate deal. He wanted a separate deal, not a band contract.
That surprised me actually. Because it was a band. I mean, he was putting his band together, and when I put my our band together, we shared everything. But he was smart. I mean, he was a leader, and when I thought about it, it was him putting the band together. He did run away, with other players, and so in certain respects, I was surprised that a band's a band for me. But it was John's band, but it was a band still. And so the other guys got different kinds of deals. But that when he said that, it was like, huh, well, are you sure that's going to work, John? He said, look, that's what I want. And you know what? I went along with him.
John's cousin Tony, not exactly a supportive guy when it came to John. In fact, there was a legal battle early
Yeah,
on.
it was. I mean, in fact, when I signed him, he basically said, you can't sign him. He signed to me. I said, wait a second. And in fact, John did sign a deal with Tony, the second cousin. And we had to put our resources to get him out of that deal. And to this day, Tony has a point or two on the first couple of albums.
You signed Cinderella to a development deal with a great band. You called in Andy Johns to produce. I've heard some wild Andy Johns stories. You've got one in the book. You get a call from the singer Tom Kiefer who tells you Andy's bleeding to death. What happened?
Andy, well, I've worked with Andy after that. I mean, that was my first, go around with Andy. And Andy, it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, he'll also, little him again does stuff that I don't advocate. Um, but yeah, he was loving the music so much that when I walked into the studio, he just he was. I think I don't know where he was taking, but he was saying this music is unbelievable. I can't believe how great it is, and I'm going to bleed this music. And he literally he was cutting his wrists, and not to the artery, but his wrists were bleeding, and writing love on these speakers with the blood. And Tom was fucking freaking out. He said, I'd heard stories about it, and I said, Andy, come on, man, cool down a bit. He said, no, this band, I just love this band, and I'm going to prove it to you by cutting my wrists and not to and he literally did.
It's
I mean,
hardcore, man. Andy Johns was a great producer.
yeah, he was the epitome of rock and roll, that kind of rock and roll. But that's not my style. I mean, cutting his wrists and doing whatever
Oof.
doing that made him do it. But he put, we finished nice. Was it a nice song? No, it was the first album. That was it, and that blew into the charts. It blew right.
So you signed Bon Jovi, Cinderella, Kingdom Come, and Dan Reed Network, as well as rebooting the careers of Men Without Hats. and to a lesser extent Uriah Heep. But at Polygram, you had climbed as high as you were going to get. There would be a career move coming. You had offers, including Atlantic Records. You ultimately end up with Atco Records, where you were the president and CEO. One of the early bands you signed there was Pantera. You were with Polygram when you were interested in them initially, right? Tell us about that experience, discovering them, working with them. Each guy had a unique personality, made for a perfect combination of creative forces.
In the top three bands of the live bands that weren't signed, I think they're number one or two for me. I went down. I was familiar with them because they'd had records they did before for their own on their own label with Vinny and Daryl's father in Texas, and they were kind of a hair band at one point. And then when Phil joined, uh, their sound became a lot harder, and they put out a record called Power Metal, and it changed the sound a little bit. And then their lawyer, a guy called Jules Kurtz, he showed me this video at Polygram, and I said, "Wow, that band has changed, and these songs that they're doing, I've never seen this before or heard this." And I said, "Look, bring it to me when when I'm over." I was basically serving my notice out. I'm going to be at ATCO, and I went over there, and he said, "The band's ready. You want to go see the band?" And I said, "Sure, of course I would." And I went down to a club in Arlington, Texas, running a record label. I have 60, 70 people working for me. And I just remember um, going down there thinking, damn, I hope they're as good as what I just saw on video here. And within three songs, I wasn't just a fan. I just knew that this band had everything. I mean, almost jumped into the mosh pit, even though it was a small mosh pit.
Yeah.
I mean, Phil was just a brilliant, amazing frontman. Vinny was just it was blew me away as a drummer. Dimebag, just like it was everything, and they had the audience completely wrapped. And within those three songs, third song, I just knew that if I went down there and went down there with I hope they're as good, and came away saying they're not just as good, they're better. They're something different. They're incredibly special, and they're doing something that no one else is doing. I signed basically on the spot.
The personalities of each guy, very unique.
Oh, unique plus. I mean, they were real rowdy Texans, and thankfully, I had a couple of A&R guys working for me that I put in place to try to keep up with them. Their black tooth grins, they had shots and beer, and you had to keep up with them. And I do this and throw it over my shoulder. Uh,
So,
but, but yeah, they were there, but they were always great wonderful people. The best, the best personality until Phil, I'd moved on by then until Phil, discovered the wonders of hard drugs, and that was a tough thing for that. And when they broke up, it was so sad that this band, who were just like they were again completely authentic, doing something that no one else is doing, and so fucking good at it.
yeah.
I was the number one fan, and when I signed them, I knew that number one, radio was playing AOR, and I knew they would never be on radio. Number two, that MTV was still going as a number marketing tool, and I knew this band would never be an MTV band. So I said, I'm going to market the band by, first of all, getting a good manager, and I found them a good manager, a guy called Walter O'Brien, and putting my money, or our money, the record company's money, behind their tour. I said, you go out there and tour your ass off, because if you could convince me in three songs, you got 500 people, and then 6 months later, 5,000 people will show up. And sure enough, that's what happened.
That's exactly what happened.
And then Cowboys from Hell came out, and it blew into the top five. And then the second album, Vulgar Display of Power, came out. It went right in at number one.
You reestablished the career of AC/DC. This is a great story. Talk about this. At the time you worked with them, they were on Atlantic and on the verge of being dropped.
Yeah, they were. And that was when I heard the news that thinking of dropping AC/DC. I mean, I just like you, you can't drop AC/DC. They are rock and roll. This is what rock and roll's about. Um, so I had inherited a couple of artists on Atco. I had to sign some new artists, of course, including Pantera and Dream Theater, et cetera, et cetera. But I had Stevie Nicks and Pete Townsend I inherited from the old Atco repertoire. And I said to the head of the Warner people, it was a Warner Music Group thing. How about instead of you dropping AC/DC and them not having a label, I take them on and I'll trade Stevie Nicks to Atlantic. It was almost like a baseball trade. Um, and AC/DC was known as being very anti-record company. They would not allow people around them in the record company, people around. They thought the record guys were all suits and knew nothing about what it was like. Thankfully, I got the word from their brother George, who was in a band called the Easy Bees, and he said, if it's the same Derek Shulman that was in the group Simon Dupree, then he's a musician. This is the Mike Malcolm and Angus, and I was able to get their trust. And someone,
Isn't that amazing?
this is what,
How life works like that.
and they opened the door to me.
Yeah, because they had Blow Up Your Video and came out in '88. It did okay.
Just okay. And then flick of the switch before.
Right, flick of the switch. But then comes Razor's Edge.
And so I said, guys, let's get you back to where you should be. And I, got them in touch with my go-to producers, Bruce Fairburn, Bob Rock in Vancouver. And I said, look, you don't have to record tomorrow. Let's get some time, but and put together a great AC/DC album. And to be fair, Bruce Fairburn and Bob, they insisted on as well because they were dying to record them, but only when they had the great songs. Uh, so we all went up to Vancouver and we produced the Razor's Edge and we decided what the first track was going to be and we put it out. And Thunderstruck hit the airwaves and AC/DC was back in a huge way.
And it's a song you still hear everywhere, sports stadiums,
It's,
everywhere. And it had Money Talks and it had Are You Ready? That whole album I love. And really, they haven't looked back ever since. I mean,
no, and we did the live album then, and that's that was me. I hope helping them to rediscover their their chops and what they should be on as the probably one of the best ever rock and roll bands.
yeah, hands down. Now, another story similar is Bad Company. This is a band without Paul Rogers. Brian Howe was the lead singer. They had been written off.
Yeah.
Talk about how you get them back into the spotlight.
Same kind of situation. The manager begged me actually to they were going to be dropped again, and Brian was a singer. They had one album out with Brian, but Brian didn't get along with the rest of the band. Brian has had an ego, a great singer, but had an ego that really put Mick Ralph's back up a lot and really opened his mouth too much. In the shoes of Paul Rogers, I mean it's a difficult hole to fill basically. And Brian tried to, I mean, he did fill it actually in a major way, but his vocals and his style were not exactly what Bad Company used to be. But I knew Brian. This is just a crazy story because the manager said, "Would you take over this job of being on ADCO?" And I said, "Okay, I think I will," because I knew Brian was a really good singer, a great singer, and the producer Terry Thomas I knew very well as well. But
He was previously with Ted Nugent, right? Brian Howe?
yeah, Brian was a unusual singer. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I knew him from way before that because he was from my hometown of Portsmouth. And he used to come see Gentle Giant rehearse.
Oh, wow.
So he was English and I could relate to him as a person that from my hometown. And I knew that he had a mouth on him that would put people's backs up. But I could tell Brian, shut the F up. and,
Yeah.
and if you said that to a musician, generally as a record company guy, you'd get either a punch in the nose or a fuck you. But he would listen to me and say, so we could relate to each other, and so I was able to get them to record together because Mick and Simon, they were like, this guy we can't, we really can't deal with, but we did, and we were produced the album Holy Water, and that album just blew into the charts. That single went number one.
If you needed somebody, the title track,
And
and there's one more.
we had three or four singles on that, and Bad Company was on the top of the charts again. All be different kind of Bad Company.
Well, there's so much more in the book. I didn't even ask you about Enough's Enough, and Kingdom Come, and Dream Theater. You became president of Roadrunner Records, overseeing signings of Slipknot and Nickelback. Amazing career. I want to finish by asking you about your epilogue in the book. And you recently had a chance to revisit your Gentle Giant music through a project involving the 1973 album In a Glass House. And it was a pretty emotional experience for you. And it made you think about your dad and your late brother Ray and your brother Phil and your bandmates. Can you
Right?
talk about that?
Yeah, I'm still in the middle of almost finished actually that and that there's something I mentioned. Well, didn't the whole idea that tech and has taken over and has kind of flattened out a lot of creativity. However, I'm using the highest end AI to separate the track. This that album was the only was an album that we couldn't find the multi-tracks to. We've remixed, or Stephen Wilson's done a lot of remixing for us on our catalog, but that one the multis we just could not find. So I'm in the studio now remixing In a Glass House. That was the album after my brother Phil left, and we went into the studio with a very hard record to make. But I'm using this highest end AI. It's much more, it's even much more further advanced than the Beatles Here and Now, or whatever it's called. And I'm able to separate the tracks individually. And it's brought back a lot of memories. And we're putting this album out in 2026. And it sounds so good, and I'm just listening to it almost like it's the first time, and I'm sitting there saying to myself, and I'm saying to my engineer, "Damn, we were damn good." It really, I could actually say it out loud. Where do those ideas come from? It's amazing to me. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing as we speak.
Looking forward to that. In the meantime, the book is out. Let's see. Did it
Tomorrow.
when it's out tomorrow? Okay, December 2nd through Jawbone Press. So people can get it wherever books are sold, all the usual outlets. You can go to bookedonrock.com to find your nearest independent bookstore to see if you want to find a copy there. And where can people find you online, Derek?
Find me through gentlegiantband.com. We have our own, merch, and it's taken care of. My son has done a ton of helping keeping the legacy alive, if you like. And the great thing is that I'm again, when I think back about my life and through the book and through whatever I've done, um, the thing that really and I hope that it comes through is that I was raised in a musical household. Music has been everything to me. And when I'm doing this album in a glass house, it really reiterated who I am and what I am, music and musician. Even though I was, an A&R guy and ran companies, music was everything to me, and that brought it home to me.
Yeah, reminded you what it's all about.
That's what I did.
At the core of it is the music. It's an incredible talent. And it's a gift that you give to us, the music fans, that you can't put a price on it.
Well, again, it wasn't about fame and fortune. It was about playing music.
Derek Shulman, thank you so much.
My pleasure.